Have you had an encounter with the King of the Forest and you'd like to hear it narrated on this channel? Well, if so, send me an email with all the details. You can send your email to contact@buckeyebigfoot.com. Hello there, everyone. Yes, I am a day late. We did have that train issue just a few miles from my house, and I did have to help evacuate a friend. So thank you for understanding why there was no video yesterday. All in all, everyone's good, and I think the situation is under control. So with all that said, again, I appreciate you understanding, and I really appreciate that you waited for me. And you know what? I bet the Sasquatches have been waiting too, probably tapping their great big feet impatiently. You know, I think they look forward to our journeys down into their valley as much as we enjoy making the journeys. So let's not keep them waiting. Let's saddle up and get ready. It's time to head down the trail into Sasquatch Valley. Let's go. I'm writing to tell you that I once saw a Bigfoot in the Great Smokies. Well, maybe more than once. But I was with a friend who also saw it. I never believed in all the strange things people reported before. I mean, things that happened before and after seeing a Bigfoot. Some people say strange things happen when they appear. Now that day, there were some odd things before and after. I'm going to include them because I'm not sure if they mean anything or are relevant at all. But I also want to say that I've now been hiking for 17 years, and I've never had so many odd things happen, not even collectively in a 5-year span, let alone the space of 24 hours that happened to me that day. This happened in the summer of 2012. When I was attending the University of Cincinnati, me and one guy hit it off when we found out that we were both into hiking and doing outdoors things. We decided to go backpacking on a long weekend down in the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee. We kept getting tailed or led along by annoying groups of people, so we decided to cut through to jump ahead on the trail. We just wanted away from them. Doing this, though, meant that we were going off trail down a part of a ridge to catch the trail on a switchback before it started climbing again. Now, this looked pretty simple and easy on the map, but in truth, it was a bit more challenging than we thought, and by the time we got to the trail below, the bumpuses, as we had started to call them, were within sight, and we could hear them coming. Seemed we weren't going to escape them after all. They moved faster on the cut trail than we did going through woods and brush, it turned out. So, not wanting to get tangled up with them again, we held back, and we waited to let them get farther ahead on the trail. We were there for some peace, quiet, enjoyment of nature, and quiet companionship between the two of us. So we took our sit down about 20 yards elevated up from the trail. We were up in the trees. But we were startled all of a sudden when a medium-sized black bear came down the slope about 30 yards away from us. We heard the rough huffing and paws hitting the dirt as it barreled down the slope. I can't speak for my partner, but when I looked over and I saw that bear, I saw that it was not even looking our way. It was hell-bent on getting to wherever it was that it had to go. We were not going to intersect at any point. By my quick calculation and reasoning, our best option was to stay still and do nothing. Just let the bear be a bear out there in bear country. He certainly looked like he was late for a meeting at the Black Bears of the Great Smokies Grand Poobah meeting, so let him have it. From where we were sitting, we had an unobstructed view of that bear hauling its bare butt down. We watched it hit the trail, go across, and keep going down, down, down on a ridge. We didn't move till it was just the normal sounds of the forest all around us again. No bear huffing or running sounds. We stood up and walked down to the trail, and then we kept backpacking on. At this time, we were on Rough Creek Trail, and we followed it until it came to the Little River Trail. Now, to the north from the split, there's a camp that we had planned to stay at for the night. But we had gotten there way earlier than expected, even with our weird delays. The next camp was only about 4 miles on the trail, and we calculated it was about 2.5 as the crow flies. But going crow flying meant we were going to go off trail again. But it was only 2 p.m., and we had perfect weather, so we decided to go crow, which is our term that we use for going off trail. Now, you've noticed, we liked to go off trail. I don't know why, other than it added another level of a challenge to our adventures. And 99% of the time, going off trail, or going crow, as we called it, it's no problem. Sure, we find more obstacles, but we also find more interesting things and views that a lot of others don't get to see. We came to a small creek in a depression area. It was shady and cool. We stopped here for just a little rest. By our figuring, we were about halfway to Camp 23. As before, we are sitting quietly when suddenly we hear sounds that tell us something is coming our way. Now, this was unusual. In all the years I've been backpacking, I've only run into a bear once, and it was that day. To run into another in the same day, within a couple hours, was very unusual. But there were branches breaking, and there were sounds being made like they were moving and being pushed aside, and we also could hear thudding sounds of feet running. This time, though, we were confused. It did not sound like a bear. It was more like a person walking. There was no gallop to the sound that we heard. We were both sitting with our packs off. We both have pistols and knives on us and bear spray. We both make ready with the bear spray first because this sounds like whatever it is coming near. And if it was a human, we didn't want to do anything lethal unless we had reason to. And we had no reason to believe we had reason to. But then it all stops. Dead, silent, nothing, no sound at all. We stand up cautiously, and we both take a long look all around, and we can't see anything. Nothing out of place. But the weird thing is, I feel the hair on my forehead lifting up, and my neck and my cheeks are prickly hot. At that second, I dismissed it and put it down to an adrenaline rush, and it was a release of expecting some kind of, an encounter, perhaps with a bear. 30 seconds I stood there listening. I can't tell you I was listening to silence, because I swear, I heard some breathing coming from somewhere nearby, but I couldn't make anything out. The brush was thick along the creek there and up under the trees, so I was being very cautious, because anything could have been hiding anywhere in all that brush. After another minute of both of us swiveling all around and looking everywhere, we motioned to each other, let's get out of here. Something was making both of our skins crawl. We cross the creek and keep heading in our westerly direction towards Camp 23. Now, for the first time that day, I was hoping to find people there. Most of the time, being near other people was the last thing either of us wanted. When we would roll into camps, we would groan if we counted more than 2 other people there. But that day was different. Several times I turned around as we were walking. I couldn't stop this feeling that someone was following us. If you are familiar with hiking and trails, you're also familiar with the murders that have happened along them over the years. All hikers are aware. That sort of thing is not common. In fact, bad things rarely happen out on trails. But when they happen, you pay attention. You want all the deets. You want to know who, what, where, what was the motive. You want to know everything about it. Just the prior year, in 2011, Scott Lilly was murdered over in Virginia. Yes, that was the Appalachian Trail, a whole different trail system. But it remained an unsolved murder, and it stayed with me because it was very recent. I was very aware of that murder, and that's how bad things felt to my gut as we left that creek area. Like something imminently bad was about to happen, and we needed to leave. I can't tell you any better explanation than that. Now, while we're walking away and I kept turning around, I swear to you by everything that I've ever known in my life that I turned one time and there was a scary, tall and wide shape, very dark, standing right by the trees where we had just sat down for our break. I panic grabbed my buddy and I swung him around to look. I was telling him, look, look, look. And when I did get him turned around, well, you know it. There was nothing there to be seen. To this day, I'm not sure if I willed myself to see something scary back there or if I really saw something. Because if it really was there, then how could we have not seen it when we were back there? There was brush, yes, but I don't believe something that large could have possibly hid successfully in that brush. So you decide if I was just freakishly paranoid and imaginative, or if that Bigfoot was really there. And when I turned, by the way, and saw that it wasn't there, I think my heart stopped. You know, that day and that time in particular, that's the only time in my life that I felt like I was in the set of a horror movie. I explained to my friend what it was I had seen. He looked appropriately freaked out when I told him. To his credit, he did not disbelieve me. We just decided we were going to double step it to get away from there. And we both kept looking back over our shoulders from time to time. Now, the closer we got to Shelter 23, the better I began to feel. I was sure whatever that was back there, well, it was back there. About a quarter mile from the shelter, though, a strange thing happened. We began to hear a dog barking and howling. It was a terrible kind of howl and bark. This is not what you normally hear out on the trail when people bring their dogs with them. This barking was high-pitched, frantic, and it sounded like the dog was terrified. The howling, well, it sounded full of fear. We never saw the dog, but it was upsetting for us to listen to. It lasted for several minutes. The silence, when it quit howling and barking, well, that was even worse for us, if you can believe that. Repeatedly, we called out for the dog or for whoever might be with the dog. We were thinking, were they lost? Were they in trouble? Did they need help? We probably spent an additional half hour calling and trying to find the dog and or the person with it. We never did find hide nor hair of them. We didn't hear another animal, as in something was attacking it either. There was nothing we heard but the dog. I always wondered if that dog was okay. I sure hope so. We settled in at Campground 23. It was earlier than we normally ever set up, but we were tired, and it had been a strange day. The distance we had covered hadn't been that great, but the terrain we traveled more than made up for it. We had gone up and down several ridges on our crow's path. When we got there, I was a little disturbed to see that no one was there. But eventually, 2 more buddy groups of hikers trickled in not long before sundown. There was a girl and a guy as a couple, and the other group were 3 women hiking together. We all had tents and tarps up in our own areas, and everyone seemed to be friendly and fine. No strange vibes at all. Now that night, there were some really strange sounds. There were owl-like sounds, but yet they were not owls. They sounded a mix of an old crank siren to warn you of bombs falling and an owl hooting. We all commented on it. None of us, though, knew what it was. Someone made the joke that it was probably a Bigfoot out there. Everyone laughed. And at any other time, I would have laughed too. I would have thought it was funny. But it gave me a flashback to what I had seen earlier that day, and I didn't find it funny at all. And although I had settled into a comfortable feeling by that evening, I was suddenly feeling ill at ease and jumpy all over again. But nothing happened that evening, and eventually we all went to sleep. Me and my friend were both sleeping under strung-up tarps, almost right next to each other. I remember waking up and it was dark, but I wasn't sure what it was that had awakened me. I do know I immediately felt that it was cold. It was uncharacteristically cold for a summer night in the Smokies. I was expecting a low of 70s overnight, but it felt like it was down in the 50s, the low 50s. The skin on my arms below my shirt sleeves were cold to the touch. I had a thin blanket with me, but I fell asleep on top of it. I began shifting around to get the blanket out from under me. I got the blanket out from under me and then laid back down and tried to go back to sleep. But just a few seconds after I laid down, I both heard and felt something walk right up to the exposed side of my tarp opening. I felt the air move as something moved very close by me. I opened my eyes in the darkness again, but all I saw was darkness. But I knew something was right by me. I was smelling something also, something that I had probably been smelling while I was still asleep. And when I woke up, it just didn't seem out of the ordinary, I guess. But what I smelled was a light musky odor, kind of like when you put your nose down into a dog's fur, and it probably needs a bath. It's not dirty, but it's just musky. I also felt like I was feeling body heat radiating from something very near me. Maybe I was imagining it, but I really don't think so. I was, however, paralyzed with fear. I suddenly had bionic hearing, and I believe I could hear it breathing and lightly huffing. It could have been sniffing the air intentionally, I thought, or it might have been taking in deep lungfuls of air. Either way, whatever it was getting a nose full. That was not my imagination. After perhaps another 2 or 3 seconds, to my relief, I heard it walk away, and I felt the air move, and then the air was clear around me. I breathed a shaky sigh of relief. I was certain a black bear had just walked in between mine and my friend's tarps, stood there, sniffing us, deciding which one of us might make a nice midnight snack, and luckily for us, we just weren't what it wanted. I whispered to my friend to wake him up, but he was already awake, and he was scared you-know-what-less. As soon as he heard me whisper, I could hear him scrambling over from his tarp to mine. He was having trouble whispering to me. He was jumpy, maybe shaky and scared, but even his whispers weren't coming out right. He said he woke up, and he was being dragged by an arm out from under his tarp. He said he was half awake and half asleep, but he made some kind of sound of surprise, and whatever it was dropped his arm. Unsure of what was happening, he reached under his bedroll for his knife, thinking it was just someone poking around looking to steal things or maybe worse. I told him that I thought it was a bear. I told him how it was sniffing. And then he reminded me that if a bear pulls you somewhere, they do it with claws or teeth. They don't do it with a firm grip around your arm. We're frantically whispering about what this could mean, what it could be, and I'm starting to get my gun out and my flashlight. I told him to get his, but he was like a scared kid who refused to go back to his own bed in a thunderstorm. He wasn't doing anything alone, not even going 5 feet in the darkness over to his belongings. Then a few more things happened. While he and I were talking, we heard one of the girls squeal, and then they started yelling someone had better leave them alone. I believe she used the word dirty pervert. The guy from the other group, as in the guy and the girl couple, immediately said it wasn't him. He was with his girlfriend. And you could tell by his voice he was in another part of the campground. So I felt compelled to yell out that we were both all the way over where we were. I then saw a flashlight come on across the way, about the same time as I found my flashlight and turned it on. The women were outside of their tent, flashing light all around. They were pissed. They were sure it was one of us that had touched them. They saw, though, that we were all where we should have been. I don't think we could have covered that distance in the darkness, and I told them so. After everything settled down, We all did try to go back to sleep. But I wasn't doing so good with that. Probably no one else was either. I had my eyes open, and I was holding my pistol up to my chest. The weird things had been adding up all day, and I just could not relax. My friend didn't sleep either. An hour might have passed, and more than once I was sure I heard footsteps in the darkness somewhere nearby. I would turn the flashlight on and never see anything. Branches would snap, and there was a slow, deliberate progression of the sounds of something walking in the woods around us. You could literally follow it with your eyes in the darkness, just from the sound of branches moving and limbs breaking as it moved. I don't know how many times I flipped the flashlight on, but it was useless. No matter what I did, I never saw anything. I think I did doze a little before dawn. Now, the next thing I knew, I was being pulled out from under my tarp by my ankle. The grip on my ankle was a hand, and it was crushingly strong. I yelled. The surprise movement made me lose the flashlight that I had in my left hand, but my right hand, that still had my pistol. In a panic, I shot ahead and above me, where anything that was holding my ankle might have been. In my defense, in my half-sleep, I also thought it was a bear taking me. I shot blindly. But I took that shot, and it let go of my ankle. Reflexively, I fired 2 more times. I am certain because my .38 had 6 rounds in it, and when I counted in the morning, there were 3 left, so I know how many shots I fired. It was panic firing, but I couldn't control it. I believe that all 3 hit their mark, but I have no proof. Would 3 .38 bullets bring down a Bigfoot at close range? I'm inclined to think that it would, but if it did, it gave up its ghost far away from the campsite that night. I fired those shots. It dropped me, and it took off. It sounded like a semi-truck barreling through the woods. It only grunted with a bit of a yelping sound when I fired the shots. When it ran, it did not scream. The only sound was the sound of it breaking branches. Everyone was up now, and everyone is shining flashlights everywhere, calling out to each other. But the light couldn't penetrate the thick woods of trees enough to see what was leaving the area. But I didn't need to see it. I had felt that hand. My friend was right. That had an opposable thumb, and it was big, and it was strong. That hand was exactly like a human's. When it dragged me, I also remember I brushed against the fur on its leg as it started to drag me. The leg I felt was solid and large. A human? Well, a human would have succumbed right away to those 3 bullets. Even the strongest human couldn't have made it across the campground at a dead run. But that thing, it had the strength to run. Now, how far it ran, I don't know. It was almost dawn when this happened, and we quickly all got packed, and we were ready to get out of there. Everyone else was convinced that it was an attempted bear attack. At least, that's what we told each other. We compared notes with the girls who were also touched in the night, and what they said didn't match anything a bear would do. But by golly, they were sticking to that story. I think it was more comforting for them to think that it was a bear than of any other alternative. They assured us they would get with park rangers and report it, and we said we would too, and all of us exchanged our information. But I never reported it. Me and my friend, well, we knew exactly how that would play out, and I gave bogus info to those other girls and that couple. I did not want to get caught up in any of this. My fear was instinctual, though it wasn't reasonable. At daylight, there was a very clear blood trail going off into the trees. Now, anyone with a half an ounce of tracking skill could have followed that trail easily. But not a single one of us were up to doing that. And for the record, I don't think anyone else went to the rangers either, and I am certain that none of them really believed what happened that night was due to a bear, despite all of us agreeing that it was. How do I know that? Well, because the guy and the girl, they were trailing behind us, and they were the last ones in that camp as we left. When I turned back, I saw him scuffing and throwing dirt on all the obvious blood in the area. I guess it was so no one who came upon it that day would report something amiss, meaning they weren't going to leave evidence for the Rangers if they reported it either. The atmosphere as we all left the campground that morning was weirded out to the max. We talked about that freaky bear and how we hoped that the bear was dead, and how we would all back each other up that it was a self-defense shooting of a bear in case one of us was going to get in trouble, as in me for shooting a bear. But we weren't taking too much trouble to look each other in the eye as we said those things. The goodbyes, they were half-hearted and weak. We deliberately staggered our leaves a little bit. I think it's because we really didn't want to be stacked up on the trail. We really didn't want to talk to each other anymore. We couldn't wait to put distance between ourselves and that camp area and each other. Me and my friend still had 2 more days of hiking to get out of there to get to our meet-up and pick-up point. The next night, our food sacks were stolen from the branches they were in, so we had to hike the last day with no food whatsoever. I have never had that happen in all the years I've hiked, not before or since. The same night that something or someone stole our food satchels, well, we heard things being thrown and landing all around us where we camped. Nothing landed in the camp. Nothing hit us. But I heard things whizzing through the air in the dark. Then we heard the leaves smacking as it came down, and then we heard a thunking sound when it would hit the dirt. No matter how much we looked, we never found what was being thrown or who was throwing it. Me and my friend took turns sitting up while the other slept that night. We weren't taking any more chances. I have so many thoughts about what happened during those days, I could probably write a novel. In fact, I feel like I already have. Please forgive me. But I think our biggest mistake was going as the crow flies between Camp 24 and Backcountry Camp 23. I felt like we crossed its territory, and that is a thing that you shouldn't do. What we did angered it, so it came into our territory. I have no proof of that. It's just the way I feel. I have hiked that area before and since then, and there was never anything to report. I feel like that creature knows the trails belong to humans, and for the most part, it stays away. But if you go off trail, you risk angering it. You risk walking into its territory. So I feel like it just paid us back that night. Me and my friend both kind of think it was looking to take a human that night. Maybe it was angry. Maybe it was curious. Maybe it was hungry. Could it have been someone in the dark playing a game with us? Of course it could have been. But if so, they got 3 bullets to take home as a prize for playing the stupidest game ever you could play in the dark in a forest. But I really don't think it was a human. And I do not believe it was a bear. Bears don't have opposable thumbs. Bears huff, snuff, growl, and they make all kinds of noises. But this was something else. I believe, as does my friend, that we encountered a Bigfoot, a Sasquatch, whatever you want to use for a word. That's what we encountered that night. And it tried to take us. Do I think that Bigfoot is responsible for all the missing people in national parks? No, not at all. Maybe a few of them, but I don't think Bigfoot could possibly fit all the missing people situations, because I have been very interested in them since 2012, needless to say. I've read a lot. I do know that Bigfoot is out there. I never quite was sure what to think before that night, but I know what to think now. Bigfoot is real, and he tried to take me one night. Signed, Evan. Thank you for that incredible email, Evan. I'm sure everyone else was on the edge of their seats like I was. I mean, you shot a Bigfoot, you believe, 3 times, and you know it wasn't a bear. I don't know. If I had a gun, I still probably would have followed that blood trail, but that's just me. Anyway, folks, listen, I don't have too much for you tonight, just putting out the call again for submissions for both Halloween Marathon and the 12 Days of Christmas. So if you have an encounter you think would be good for either of those, be sure to send it in to contact@buckeyebigfoot.com, and be sure to tell me which season you'd like to have it narrated in. All right, everyone. Well, that's a wrap on another good night down in Sasquatch Valley. As always, I do appreciate your company, and I'm looking forward to when I get to enjoy your company again, which will be soon. But until then, please always remember, absence of proof is not proof of absence. Thanks for listening.